For decades, the US dollar has pretty much ruled the global economy. I mean, it's been the undisputed king. But now, there's a powerful group of nations, you've probably heard of them, BRICS, and they're cooking up a plan to challenge that dominance. So today, we're going to break down whether they actually stand a chance.
Okay, to really get what's at stake here, you just need one number. And it's a big one, 80%. Think about that. Nearly 80% of all global trade is still conducted in US dollars. We're talking everything from Brazilian soybeans to Saudi oil. Pretty much every major transaction on the planet, it's priced in greenbacks. So how did we even get here? And more importantly, where is all this heading? Here's the roadmap for today. We'll start with the dollar's global grip. Then we'll dig into why BRICS wants out and what their playbook actually looks like. After that, we'll cover the massive challenges they're up against, America's financial power plays, and finally, what a multipolar money future might actually mean for all of us.
All right, let's dive right into part one, the dollar's global grip. I mean, how did one single currency become the world's default setting for money? And, what happens when someone tries to challenge that power? Okay, a huge piece of the dollar's power puzzle is something called the petrodollar system. Basically, it's the global agreement that oil gets bought and sold in US dollars. And here's where it gets interesting. History shows this, well, let's call it a striking pattern. Whenever countries have tried to break away from this system, major geopolitical events have tended to follow. You just have to look at Iraq back in 2000 or Libya in 2009. Both of them challenged the petrodollar and both faced, let's just say, significant interventions not long after. And that history, that perception of intervention, really helps explain the challenge we're seeing today. So that brings us to Chapter 2. Why exactly do the BRICS nations want out of this system so badly? Well, for a lot of these leaders, it's deeply political. You've got Brazil's President Lula, for example, who calls the dollar an unjust and an anachronistic tool of American dominance. For him, and for others who think like him, being tied to the dollar feels like wearing a financial straitjacket. It limits their country's independence. But it's not just about political philosophy. There's also a very real, very practical fear. And the moment this fear became tangible for everyone was after Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. The US and its allies froze hundreds of billions of Russia's dollar reserves. That was a huge wake-up call. It sent a crystal clear message to the rest of the world. Hey, your dollar holdings, they're not totally under your control. They're vulnerable to US foreign policy. This desire for autonomy isn't exactly new. It actually has deep roots going all the way back to the Cold War's non-aligned movement. Back then, newly independent states were trying really hard not to get forced into choosing between the US and the Soviet Union. What's different now is that BRICS is trying to turn that old ambition into a concrete, modern financial strategy. Okay, so if that's the why, let's talk about the how. What is the actual playbook BRICS is using to try and make this de-dollarization thing happen? It really boils down to three main strategies. Path number one, promote a rival currency. And right now, China is pushing its yuan hard for that role. Path number two, just bypass the dollar completely. We're talking direct country-to-country trade deals. And path number three, embrace new tech. They're looking at digital currencies to build brand new payment systems that are totally outside of Western control. And look, this isn't just a bunch of talk on a PowerPoint slide. It's actually happening. Right now, Russia and China are settling over 90% of their trade using their own currencies, the ruble and the yuan. And you've got India starting to pay for some of its oil from the Middle East in rupees. Now, are these giant leaps? Not yet, but they are absolutely concrete steps, proof that the plan is in motion. But let's be real here. Wanting to dethrone the dollar is one thing. Actually doing it? That is a Herculean task. So let's talk about the massive, and I mean massive, obstacles standing in their way. The single biggest hurdle for BRICS might actually be, well, BRICS itself. There are some serious internal divisions. You have China and Russia who are pretty openly challenging US power. But then you have a country like India, and their biggest fear is, are we just going to swap our dependence on the US dollar for a new dependence on the Chinese yuan? And that's a huge problem for them.
And Indian officials have been incredibly blunt about this. They're not mincing words. The Commerce Minister basically said a shared currency with China is impossible, full stop. The political mistrust between New Delhi and Beijing runs so deep that a unified BRICS currency is pretty much a non-starter right out of the gate.
And then you just have to look at the numbers, and they tell a pretty stark story. For all the ambition, for all the talk, China's yuan still only accounts for a tiny slice of global transactions. We're talking maybe 3%. The dollar's dominance isn't just a habit, you see. It's deeply, deeply wired into the entire global financial system. So what exactly makes the dollar so incredibly hard to replace? To understand that, we have to look at the powerful infrastructure the U.S. has built around it to protect its position.
The absolute cornerstone of this power is a system called SWIFT. Now, the best way to think about SWIFT is like the central nervous system of global finance, or maybe the internet's plumbing for money. It's not a bank itself, it's a secure messaging system that connects over 11,000 financial institutions. Pretty much every major international payment runs through it, and that gives the US and its allies an incredible amount of control. And because SWIFT is so central, it becomes one of America's most potent weapons, financially speaking. Washington could put pressure on SWIFT to just cut a country off. And when that happens, that country is effectively locked out of the global financial system. We saw this happen with Iran back in 2012, and again with Russia in 2022. It's a huge deal.
And that power, the ability to flip that switch, is exactly why the whole BRICS financial agenda is seen as such a direct threat in Washington. As former President Donald Trump said, the view from some corners is that BRICS literally set up to hurt us and take our dollar off as the standard. Okay, so you've got the huge ambition of BRICS on one side and the massive entrenched power of the US on the other. Where does all this leave us? What does the future of global money actually look like?
Well, the most likely outcome isn't some dramatic collapse of the dollar overnight. That's probably not happening. Instead, it looks like we're slowly drifting toward a more fragmented world, a patchwork of competing currency blocks. You could have a dollar-led West, a yuan-centered Asia, and a BRICS trade zone, all kind of operating in parallel.
And you can already see this shift happening in real time if you know where to look. I mean, key U.S. partners like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, they're now engaging with BRICS. You've got central banks all over the world buying up gold at record rates, trying to diversify their reserves away from the dollar. And the U.S. isn't just sitting still, it's developing new regulations for digital currencies, trying to make sure it can counter their use for evading sanctions.
So in the end, this is about so much more than just what currency is used to buy oil or soybeans. What we're really watching is a fundamental shift in global power. And as the world's financial map gets redrawn right before our eyes, it leaves us with one critical question. Who is going to write the new rules?